Hi ladies and gentlemen, I really hope you're doing well. This week we're going to be looking at circadian rhythm phase disorders. Just to give you the heads up, it is heavily examined by VCA. For some reason they have a love for it. I don't know why, but here you go. So, circadian rhythm phase disorders are a group of sleep disorders involving sleep disruption that is primarily due to a mismatch between an individual's sleep-wake pattern and the pattern that is desired or required. So just so we're clear before we move on, they love this word mismatch. So when you're defining it, you should be actually using the word mismatch. So it's a mismatch between an individual's sleep-wake pattern. So, you know, the state NREM, stages 1, 2, 3, 4, and REM, right, as they move through that, and what is actually desired. So you want to sleep 8 hours or you need to sleep 8 hours. So there's a mismatch between how much you should be sleeping and how much you're actually getting. So this disruption may be caused by a naturally occurring change or a malfunction of biological mechanisms or processing regulating the sleep-wake cycle. So for example, there could be something physically or mentally wrong that is preventing you from sleeping. There could be a mismatch between an individual sleep-wake cycle and the sleep-wake schedule required by their school, work, or social schedule. So in other words, you should be sleeping 9-10 hours a night as a teenager. However, because you've got to come to school, because you also work, because you've got to do homework, you're unable to actually get the amount of hours that you need. Or it could be caused by a mismatch between an individual sleep-wake cycle and the day-night cycle of their physical environment. So in other words, you're really tired and you've been up all night working your Macca's shift, and unfortunately you are trying to sleep during the day, but because it's so light out, you can't actually sleep. So circadian rhythm phase disorders essentially involve a problem with the timing of the sleep and the wake state. So how much time you're getting, when you're getting it, is often a mismatch between when you should be awake and when you should be asleep. So you cannot sleep when sleep is desired, needed, or expected. As a result, the sleep episodes occurring at the least preferable or inappropriate times. The corresponding wake periods may also occur at undesirable times. Think of all the times that you've slept in. This usually means that you have to fall asleep later, which makes you sleep in later the next day. It's a never-ending cycle. And therefore, the individual usually complains of insomnia or excessive sleepiness because you're sleeping more than you should or not sleeping enough. So you tend to get tired and all that sort of stuff. So this one here, and I cannot stress this enough, VCA love it, and they will examine it like crazy. The sleep-wake shift in adolescence is really, really important according to VCA. You must know it, so please make sure you know it. If you don't, please ask me questions. So numerous research studies have found that adolescents need about 9.25 hours a night, that's you guys, to function at their best when awake. Yet many males and females between the ages of 13 and 19 years sleep considerably less than this every night. Biological influences on adolescent sleep primarily involve the biological clock regulating the circadian sleep-wake cycle through melatonin secretions. So essentially what it's saying is that because of your hormones are releasing melatonin later than what you would when you were 10 or 11, right? So your hormones are secreting melatonin later, which means that you're falling asleep later. And it's usually by about 1 to 2 hours. So I would also recommend, and we'll just highlight that, highlight melatonin. So there is less melatonin being released. So it's less. All right. So this change in the timing of the major sleep episode is known as a sleep-wake cycle shift and affects an adolescent's ability to fall asleep at the earlier times that they did as a child. So a 10-year-old may have been sleepy and ready for bed at 9 p.m. every night, but at say 15, they don't feel sleepy at 9 p.m. So think about all the times that you've gone to bed this week. It hasn't necessarily been at 9:30 or 7:30 like you usually would have. It might be 11, and that's when you start to feel tired. Unfortunately, this is not ideal because you still need to get up for school. The naturally occurring delay in timing of sleep onset also means that there is a biologically driven need to sleep 1 or 2 hours longer given the changed sleep onset timing. That's not a problem if the time of getting up in the morning can be chosen. Now, something that's actually quite interesting, because we are currently in lockdown and you're not going to school, you may be going to sleep later, but this current opportunity gives you the chance to sleep in as well, which means that you're able to make up that sleep debt that you have because of the sleep-wake shift in adolescence. So that's actually quite a good thing, I guess. However, on an ordinary day, most adolescents do not have that luxury of sleeping in. School or work starts at a set time, even if their biological clock makes them feel like it's 1 or 2 hours too early. So your biological clock, according to the your hormones, says that you should be going to bed later and getting up later. But unfortunately, you are currently going to bed later but getting up at the same time as you would normally. So it is a little bit of a problem. Apart from COVID, COVID is actually helping this problem. So this means that early school or work starts don't allow the adolescent to sleep in and get the additional sleep that would otherwise occur naturally. Now, some schools, not in Australia of course, but some schools actually take this into account and they don't start school till 10 o'clock. So unless you live there, it's not going to happen. So in sum, the entire sleep-wake cycle is delayed by 1 to 2 hours in relation to the desired sleep and wake-up time. This type of sleep-wake cycle shift is called a delayed sleep phase disorder. Please, for the love of everything that is good in the world, remember this name, delayed sleep phase disorder. It is a sleep-wake cycle shift in adolescence, otherwise known as delayed sleep phase disorder. Know it, okay? Please. So, efforts to advance the timing of sleep onset, such as an early bedtime, dimming lights earlier, restricting the use of digital technologies when in bed to earlier times, and relaxation techniques can be helpful at times, but generally result in little permanent success. So, I can recommend that you don't turn your phones on until don't use your phones late at night, but you're going to completely and utterly ignore me. It is helpful, but it's not exactly successful because your hormones are going to release melatonin at a later time regardless. It may help you slightly, but not a great amount. So, there we go. Note, heavily examined. Just to go through, sleep-wake shift in adolescence is a circadian rhythm phase disorder. Make sure you know that. Adolescents need about 9.25 hours of sleep per night to function properly, but are not getting this amount of sleep, and this affects you mentally and physically. Due to hormones and the release of melatonin, there is a shift of the sleep-wake cycle forward by about 1 to 2 hours. That means that you aren't getting tired until 1 to 2 hours later than you previously did as a child. As you're falling asleep later, you naturally need to sleep another 1 to 2 hours in the morning. Unfortunately, school and work commitments prevent you from making up the lost sleep. So you're not getting 9.25 hours. And when you do your sleep diary, you'll work out that you're doing a lot less than what you probably should, but probably more than what you would do normally if you were, going to school instead of in lockdown. So, like I said before, you need to make up sleep debt. So sleep debt is a sleep that is owed and needs to be made up because daily sleep requirements have not been met. It is sometimes described as the difference between the amount of sleep that is needed to function at an optimal level and the amount of a person actually gets. For example, a nightly sleep debt of 90 minutes between Monday and Friday would add up to a total sleep debt of 7.5 hours. On the weekends, adolescents will often sleep in to make up their sleep loss. However, this usually results in going to bed even later, which can temporarily shift the major sleep episode further forward so that by Monday morning, getting out of bed or going to school is harder than on any other day. So, in other words, let's say, for example, you're going to bed at 1 a.m. every night. That's really bad, don't do that. But you're going to bed at 1 a.m. every single night. That means you're only getting maybe 6 hours of sleep per night instead of the 9 hours. So you're missing about 3 hours of sleep each night. In theory, when it comes to the weekend, you should be you should be making up the sleep, so you sleep in repeatedly, right? But the problem is, because you're sleeping in, it means that you're going to be falling asleep later in the evening. So you may not, on the weekend, because you slept until 12, you are going to be going to sleep at maybe 3 a.m. in the morning, which means that on Monday, when you try to get up, you're going to be having even less sleep. And that's why Mondays are so hard. Because you've slept in on the weekend, it ruins any kind of routine that you have. And that's why you should probably be getting up at the same time every morning, or at least only an hour or so after, not 4 hours, like some of you do. Here's some tips. I strongly recommend you read through them. It's just to help you out. Another issue that we have is shift work. So as we live in a globalized world that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, shift work is a type of work schedule designed to meet the demands of a 24/7 society. The practice usually divides the 24-hour day into shifts, set periods of time of about 8 hours or so, during which employees perform their duties. In Australia, 3 traditional shifts are the day, afternoon and night shift. Day shifts typically start and end during the daytime. Afternoon shifts start mid-afternoon and end in the evenings, and night shifts start late in the evening and end during the daytime. If you don't know that, I can't help you. These may be on a fixed schedule and require employees to work the same shift on a regular ongoing basis. If that's the case, you can work around that. You know that, all right, I am going to be doing an evening shift on, Monday. Therefore, I need to make sure that I go to bed early on the Tuesday, right? These are the sort of things. If it's fixed, you can work around it. But if it's a rotating schedule, it means that employees need to change their shifts every so often to work a mix of day and night, or afternoon or night shifts. And that means you can't actually plan for it, right? So your bedtime and wake schedules, also sleep-wake cycles, are going to be all over the place. So people who work permanent night shift tend to experience problems with sleep quantity and quality more than people who do not do shift work, right? You often complain of being tired both on and off the job. Many sleep less when they go to bed in the morning after the night shift. The reduction in sleep amount may be between 1 to 4 hours less a day than someone who doesn't work work shifts. So in other words, what they're saying is, if you work a night shift, there is a good chance that you are not going to get as much sleep as you probably should, because you just can't get, that amount of sleep, mainly because of things that happen during the day. So night shift workers also have a greater tendency to sleep twice during the day, a major episode in the morning after work, and then a nap of an hour or so before going to work. However, they often find it difficult to fall asleep and or maintain sleep during the day, despite attempts to optimize environmental conditions for sleep. So They can put all the blinds up, they can put, you know, sound barriers, whatever. It still means that they're getting less sleep. And it's usually because, one, our body is so used to sleeping during nighttime, not during the day. And also, if you're working night shift, you still need to do things during the day. You still need to, you know, go shopping or, you know, get groceries or, you know, pay bills, that sort of stuff. You still need to be able to do that. And most of the time, you can only do that during the day. So you're losing sleep when, if you work during the day, you'd be sleeping throughout the night. Overall, the major sleep episode of the night shift worker is reported by a significant number as unsatisfactory and unrefreshing. It is common for night shift workers to revert to daytime routines for a day or two during days off, which tends to make the circadian rhythm for the sleep-wake cycle unstable. So in other words, they may work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night shifts, but on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they are only working day shifts. Or they may have days off, which means they get up during the day. The problem is, because they're getting up during the day and then sleeping at night, they're ruining their whole routine. It's completely changed. And it causes a lot of problems. So, rotating shifts. Work rosters with rotating shift work schedules are associated with a higher frequency of sleep disturbances than rosters with fixed schedules. In particular, the most difficult rotating schedules to adjust to are those that change too quickly from one shift type to another because of lack of time for the sleep-wake cycle to adjust and align with the day-night cycle of an individual's environment and other external sleep-wake cycles or cues. So let's say, for example, that if you're on a rotating shift, there is a good chance that you might work the night shift one night, then the following day you might work the afternoon shift, and then you might work the morning shift, then you might work the evening shift. And because it's constantly changing, your body cannot adjust, and the sleep-wake cycle tends to be completely mismatched. And remember, you have to use the word mismatched. So if rotating shifts have to be used, the longer a person works on a particular shift, the more likely it is that their sleep-wake cycle will make at least some adjustments and the individual will be better for it. So let's say, for example, you happen to be you know, working 5 nights a week as a night shift. That would be better than working one day night shift, one day afternoon, one day morning. By changing it, it actually disrupts and mismatches the sleep-wake cycle, and you can't have that. So a work roster for which the individual has longer periods on each shift before rotating to the next shift also tends to be better because it allows the individual to have a longer period off between one shift rotation and the next. This gives the body more time to reset its sleep-wake cycle and get in sync with the external environment. A schedule with 3-week shifts is generally considered preferable to 1 week or 3-day rotations. So if that rotating shift stays the same for 3 weeks, it's better than what it would be if it was for 1 week or a 3-day rotation. Some shift workers complain of excessive sleepiness at work and impaired sleep at home. That's just logical. On a persistent basis, to the extent that they may be diagnosed as having shift work sleep disorder. And I should probably highlight that bit too. Alright, so the 2 primary symptoms of shift work are insomnia. So you've got symptoms are insomnia when a person is trying to sleep, and excessive sleepiness when a person needs to be awake and alert. So they're the 2 symptoms of shift work. Now, jet lag is another one that VCAR really like. They enjoy it. I don't know why. So jet lag, also called time zone change syndrome, stick to jet lag, is a sleep disorder known due to a disturbance to the circadian sleep-wake cycle caused by rapid travel across multiple time zones. So as you're flying, you're crossing numerous time zones, and there's a picture that will demonstrate this. So shifting to a new time zone in this way results in a mismatch between our internal circadian biological clock and the external environment. Our biological clock is out of sync with the actual time in the time zone of the new environment. For example, our body feels that it's time to go to sleep when others are having breakfast, or it is in the middle of the afternoon in the new time zone and we feel wide awake when it is late at night and everyone else is in bed fast asleep. Because jet lag travel is quick, our sleep-wake cycle remains aligned to the environmental time cues of the home time, because there has been insufficient time to adjust to the new time cues. Consequently, our natural sleep-wake cycle, along with other circadian rhythms, is out of sync and in conflict with the light, dark, and other time cues of the external environment. It is temporary, but depending on how many time zones you've crossed and how quickly, it could actually take longer than normal. So it's pretty much saying that because you're traveling over numerous time zones, let's say, for example, in Australia, it's, 10 o'clock at night, but you get to London and it's 5 a.m., right? Because you've done that, you now need to stay awake and align your body to the environmental cues of, your new time zone. So Melbourne might be 10 o'clock, it's dark, so you should be sleeping. But because it's light outside in London, and that's where you are, you have to stay awake. So it tends to mess with you. So jet lag affects both physical and psychological symptoms that may leave us with sleep problems, feeling unwell and having more difficulty functioning than normal. We tend to experience varying degrees of difficulties in initiating or maintaining sleep, because if you're supposed to be awake, so let's say, for example, it's lunchtime in Melbourne and you're in London and it's, middle of the night, you are going to be, wide awake and you might be hungry because that's when you would normally sleep. You might experience excessive sleepiness, especially if you're awake when you would normally be asleep. You might also experience reduced daytime alertness, impaired concentration and cognitive performance, and digestive problems. So the severity and duration of jet lag symptoms vary considerably depending on the number of time zones crossed in one journey, the direction in which you're going, so east or west, or the timing of takeoff and arrival, sleep timing, duration and quality on the flight, and personal characteristics of the individual involved. Older adults tend to actually have a lot of difficulty adjusting than what younger adults and children do. Generally, the further you travel and the more time zones you cross in one journey, the longer it is to take to adjust. And I can testify to that. I flew from Australia to London and I left early in the morning from Melbourne, got into London at 5 a.m. in the morning, but I didn't sleep on the flight at all. It was horrible. And I got there, but I had to stay awake until bedtime. So even though I'd been awake on the plane the entire time, it took about, I think, 21 hours, and then I had to stay up from 5 a.m. and I think I didn't go to bed till 10. I felt horrible, right? But I was traveling west. We'll get to that in a sec. So jet lag is less disruptive when we travel in a westerly direction. Traveling west is best because when we travel in a westerly direction, we follow the apparent pathway of the sun. So we might just do that on there. So you follow the apparent pathway of the sun. So let's say, for example, and I'm so sorry if you hear my dogs behind me. All right. So if you flew this way, this is westbound. So this is technically my flight. So from Melbourne all the way to London. Because I've flown in a west direction, it takes only about 8 days to adjust. And that's true. When I got to London, I was able to stay up, right? Look, I was a bit groggy and didn't feel great, right? And it felt terrible, but I was able to function. I was able to do things. I went and, did the tourist thing, and it wasn't that much of a problem. However, I flew back to Melbourne from London, and I felt like I was dying. It was bad, right? I couldn't function. I fell asleep even though I was outside. I tried to adjust to the environmental cues, so I was staying awake at daytime, try to sleep at night, right? I felt physically ill. I could not function. I walked into a wall. I had school the next day, and I walked into a wall, and I fell asleep in class. But we won't discuss that, because none of the principal team know that I fell asleep in class. And my class was really good. They didn't dub on me. I don't know if you guys would. Anyway, moving on. So I would recommend putting this particular table into your notes. West is best because we follow the apparent pathway of the sun. This means that there's less of a mismatch between our biological clock and the day-night cycle of the external environment. So you're actually following the sun, therefore you're sleeping at about the same time as what you normally would, in theory. So overcoming jet lag, and sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. We'll get to that in a sec too. So resetting the biological clock for the sleep-wake cycle to the destination time as quickly as possible is the key to overcoming jet lag and minimizing its effects. To begin the adjustment process to a new time, travelers should start to change their eating, sleeping, and other behavioral patterns to accord with the destination time routines. So just before you're going overseas, you should try to go to bed and wake up at the same time as what it would be if you were in that time zone. While in transit, so whilst you're traveling, environmental cues can be manufactured to be in harmony with the destination time, minimizing the effects of jet lag on arrival. And here are a few things, and I'll tell you what works, what doesn't. So upon boarding the plane, changing watches to the destination time zone is a good starter. So I did this. As soon as you get on the plane, forget whatever time it was previously. Change it automatically to the time that you have in the destination place. Because in that way you know when you should be eating and when you should be sleeping. Depending on the destination time, turning on the light to stimulate daytime or sitting in a window seat and opening the shades to take in more light may be appropriate. I made it very, I tried to do this. It didn't work for me because I can't do it. But when it was nighttime, I tried to sleep, and I even tried to take melatonin tablets because melatonin helps you to sleep. It didn't work for me. It may work for you. And so I was awake when I should be awake, and I tried to sleep when it was supposed to be nighttime in London. I even put on, the little dodgy eye masks that can help, and I turned on the light when it was supposed to be daytime. And most planes or flights do that automatically for you. So trying to sleep in sync with the likely sleep time at the destination may also help. Yeah, it does if you can fall asleep on planes. Younger people can do it a lot better than what older people can, just so you know. Nighttime could be stimulated by wearing sunglasses or an eye mask. I went for eye mask. My advice, don't get those dodgy ones. Get a decent one if you're going to fly. Actually get it from, a decent one. I recommend ones that are infused with lavender because it helps you to sleep, and ones that are comfortable and stay on because there's nothing worse. If on arrival it is daytime, spending time outside can also speed up the adjustment to the new time zone by helping the biological clock reset. Hotels kind of help you do this because you usually cannot check in until about 2 or 3 p.m. in the afternoon, especially if you arrive in the early morning. I got in at 5 a.m. and I struggled to actually find somewhere to go, so I dropped off my bags and I just walked to London. And when I say I walked London, I walked London. I went from one end to the other. All right, so to sum up, adolescents aren't getting the amount of sleep that they should due to the sleep-wake shift cycle in adolescence. Shift workers, especially rotating shift workers, experience more disturbances in sleep as they are unable to establish a sleep routine. As you travel over numerous time zones, it is difficult for the body to adjust to the environmental time cues at the same pace, which results in jet lag. So the more time zones you cross, the longer it takes for the body to adjust. And it took me weeks. Travelling west is best. So travelling from Melbourne to London is a lot better physically than what it would be normally. All right, so a worked exam question. So Steph chose not to include adolescents under the age of 18 in her research because they might be experiencing a circadian phase disorder. Identify and describe the likely circadian phase disorder experienced by adolescents under the age of 18, which is 2 marks. All right, so let's have a look. We have to use the word Steph, right? We also know that for 2 marks, 1 mark will be identifying, 1 mark will be describing. So we need to describe and identify the circadian phase disorder by adolescence. So we automatically know that it's the delayed sleep-wake cycle. So you get 1 mark for each of the following. Correct identification of the circadian phase disorder as sleep-wake shift, delayed sleep phase onset, adolescent phase delay, or adolescent sleep onset disorder. Essentially, whichever one, go with the one that I've used for this PowerPoint. The second mark is an accurate description of sleep-wake shift in adolescence as a delayed onset of sleep and wake in adolescence, or a delayed body clock circadian rhythm. So in other words, you've described the fact that in adolescence there is a delayed onset of sleep and waking in adolescence. And then, as only 1 mark was allocated for the description, students were not required to include information about why the delay occurs. You don't need to. It just says identify and describe. So in other words, name it and define it. So that's what those two mean. Name and define. Sleep deprivation could not be accepted as an alternative response for the likely circadian phase disorder, mainly because they're referring specifically to 18-year-olds. Sleep deprivation can occur to anybody, but they're referring specifically to adolescents. If the identification of circadian phase disorder was incorrect, the response was not awarded any marks. So if you didn't name it properly, you didn't get the 2nd mark, even if that definition was correct. And then I believe there's other activities. So do them should you choose.